The apparition of a grieving woman reportedly haunts the Chapel of the Cross Cemetery in Annandale, Mississippi. Legend has it that this ghost is the young and beautiful Helen Johnstone, the victim of one of Mississippi's most tragic tales of heartbreak and loss. Just days before her wedding day, in 1859, Helen's beloved fiance, Henry Vick, was struck down in a duel. The Johnstone family promised to one day bury the grief-stricken young woman in the plot next to her lost love. But unfortunately, she was not, thus resulting in the many claims that her spirit will not leave. I'm Ashley McLaughlin, and I'm going to tell you a ghost story. This is Southern Haunts. The story of Helen Johnstone, the disappointed fiancée of Henry Vick, begins at a mansion called Annandale in Madison County, Mississippi. Helen was only 10 when her father, John Johnstone, died. It is said that the child's strong-willed mother, Margaret, had built the Italian Renaissance-style mansion to replace John's log cabin. The home was completed in 1855, just 3 years after the completion of the nearby Chapel of the Cross. Helen Johnstone was just 16 when she met the man of her dreams and would eventually become her fiancé. He was a handsome fellow, a few years older than Helen, named Henry Gray Vick. Descended from the founders of the river port city of Vicksburg, Vick was of a well-to-do family. The two met at Helen's sister's house at a Christmas party in 1855, when the handsome and charming Vick was forced to stay over a few days following a carriage mishap. Henry dined with the Johnstone ladies that evening and found himself to be completely taken with Helen and fell in love almost instantly. Helen's wealthy widowed mother, Margaret Louisa Thompson Johnstone, had only just begun building Annandale. Margaret approved of Vick's courtship of her daughter, but was concerned that Helen was simply too young to marry, and had the couple wait until Helen was 20. And because of this, Helen and Vick had a long engagement, and Mrs. Johnstone finally allowed them to set a wedding date of May 21st, 1859. They would be wed in the Chapel of the Cross in Annandale. During this period of their engagement, Helen fiercely demanded one other promise from the more worldly Henry. Seeking to protect her future husband, she wanted to be assured that he would never duel again as he had in the past. Dueling, though not legal, still occurred very often at the time. Helen was distressed that Henry might someday return to his dueling ways as a means of upholding his manly honor. About a week before the wedding was to take place, Vick left his home in Vicksburg to choose a suit for the wedding and a gift for his bride in New Orleans. While in the lively city, Vick decided to visit a local tavern for a drink, and while there, he ran into an old acquaintance, James Stith. Stith was once Henry Vick's friend. They had hunted, fished, and had gone to military school together. But in New Orleans, they shared an argument, the origins of which are questionable. Legends suggest a possible land dispute between the two men. There, in the bar room, Stith slammed a glass down and declared he would not drink in the same room as Vick, who was, Stith blustered, no gentleman. In this time, among the upper classes of Southern society, this was about as deadly an insult as one man could offer another, short of questioning the morals of his mother. Vick, quickly losing his temper, went for Stith's throat, while Stith aimed furious blows at Vick's handsome face. What might have ended as a mere barroom brawl became something more sinister. Bloody, panting, and sweating, the two men had been pulled apart by friends when Vick challenged Stith to a duel, and a red-faced Stith promptly accepted. Although dueling was by no means illegal in New Orleans in 1859, The pair, through their chosen seconds, agreed to move the duel to grounds outside Mobile, Alabama for some reason. The local authorities arrived, having been alerted of the duel. They moved in to stop the ordeal, just as Vick fired, and deliberately missed. Stith, however, did not miss, and a single shot landed right in the center of Henry Vick's forehead. He was dead before he ever hit the ground. It was May 17th, 1859, just 4 days before his wedding. In the confusion following the duel, Stith and his companions managed to escape the approaching authorities and were never heard from in the area again. Vick's friends managed to get his body back to Vicksburg. Then they took their courage in their hands and returned to Annandale to tell Helen the dreadful news. Helen had been blissfully decorating the Chapel of the Cross in Annandale, where the reception was to be held, and counting the minutes until she would be Vick's wife. When the men arrived with the news, the young bride was devastated. She managed to insist between bouts of hysterical sobbing that Vick's body be brought to her and buried in the Johnstone family plot at the chapel. Her beloved now lies there under a tall stone with a simple inscription at the bottom reading, "Henry Gray Vick, entered into rest, May 17th, 1859. After his burial for the next several months, no matter what the weather, Helen Johnstone would sit on the wrought iron bench beside Vick's grave, speaking to him between quiet sobs. At one point, she demanded that her concerned family promise that the space beside Vick would be reserved for her, that no one else would ever be buried there, only she. Margaret Johnstone, unnerved by her daughter's endless sorrow, finally took her to Scotland to visit the late Mr. Johnstone's family. They remained away for a year or more, and when they returned, Helen had somewhat recovered from her first desperation of loss. And when she was approaching 30, she married a minister named George Harris, whom she told forthrightly that she would make him a good wife, but would never love him as she had loved Henry Vick. Harris served as a clergyman for the Chapel of the Cross for years, and during the course of their marriage, Helen and George moved several times following his service as a rector. They had 3 children, and Helen spent her life with George caring for their children and assisting him in the church. In 1896, the Harrises built their retirement house on some land Helen had inherited in the Mississippi Delta, near Rolling Fork, Mississippi. The original house was destroyed by fire almost immediately after it was completed, but Helen and George rebuilt another one on a mound located on the property and called it Mont Helena. George died in 1911, but Helen continued to live at Mont Helena until her death in 1917. In the end, Helen Johnstone Harris was not buried by her beloved Henry, but beside George Harris on the Mont Helena property. But there have been several reports over the years of a beautiful young woman in a beautiful mourning gown of another century who drifts through the cemetery at the Chapel of the Cross. At Henry Vick's grave, she stops to clean away the fallen autumn leaves, to touch the moss-softened letters of his name, and to weep for her lost love. Often, people concerned by her obvious despair have approached her only to see her vanish before their startled eyes. At the end of her life, Helen Johnstone Harris, whose last thoughts, according to the people who were present when Helen died in 1917, were of Henry. She believed that Henry was visiting in the room with her discussing plans of their upcoming wedding. She called out to him, happy that he had come for her at last. Hi there, it's your host, Ashley McLaughlin. I just wanted to take a moment and thank you for tuning in to Southern Haunts. And if you like what you hear, feel free to leave a review and subscribe to the podcast to make it easier for others who like to hear haunty, spooky stuff too. Thanks.